If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Age-related macular degeneration can severely impact a person's vision. Patients suffering from age-related macular degeneration often start with blurred vision or seeing a black spot in their central vision, which can ultimately expand to the point where there is no useful central vision. Currently, age-related macular degeneration affects approximately 200 million people worldwide, a number projected to rise to 288 million by 2040 with graying populations. The exact cause of age-related macular degeneration is complex and thought to involve a combination of aging, environmental, and lifestyle factors. In this episode, we are joined by Drs. Kai Chan and Andrew Dick, founders of the ocular immunology-focused company Cirrus Therapeutics. So Drs. Chan and Dick, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Let's begin by having you introduce yourselves to our listeners. Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to go first. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kai Chan. I'm co-founder and CEO of Cirrus Therapeutics. We're a Cambridge-based biotech startup, and we're working to solve age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of vision loss in older adults. I'm a translational scientist. I have over a decade of training and research work at Harvard Medical School, including gene therapy, immunology, and vision science. I'm very passionate about translating new scientific discoveries, something that we have done today, into treatments for patients, and really delighted to be here today as aging well is something we really care deeply about. So have heard many of these podcasts and be really lucky to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Kai. And thank you, Jeff, for the invitation. I'm Andrew Dick, and I'm co-founder of Cirrus with Kai and scientific advisor. But I'm also a professor of ophthalmology and chair at the University of Bristol, which is a university in the UK, and also director of UCL's Institute of Ophthalmology, which is a big biomedical research institute affiliated with University College London. So it's strange to have two university appointments, but that's what I have. And my passion, I'm a clinician scientist, so I see patients who are aging less well and with disease. And it's been a big passion to be able to understand the processes and then to deliver an increasing health span for those patients when it comes to vision and senses.
What is age-related macular degeneration, and how does it affect one's effort to age well?
I'm happy to take that question. First of all, it's a mouthful. And maybe one thing we have to do is change the name. But unfortunately, it's something that happens with age, which is why it's called age-related. And the macula is an area of the eye, particularly of the retina, which is a tissue at the back of the eye, which is, for those who'd like to know, is a neural bit of brain that's in the eye, and it's called neural tissue that works like a photographic film to give us a light sense that then we convert into vision in the brain. And therefore, we need the retina to see well throughout life. And the macula is the most compact area where we have the highest resolution of vision. So in macular degeneration with age, you start losing the pivotal cells that work to make you see. And slowly, what happens is your central vision, the most essential bit of vision, starts decline, and you get anything from the start of wavy lines to then just a blurring of your central vision to then complete loss of your central vision. So as you age, it increases the impact of how you interact in society, how you interact as a family, how you keep yourself entertained in later life, whatever you may wish to do. And the reason I'm saying that, it isn't just about eyesight aging well. It also impacts on your cognition and your cognitive decline. So having good senses, be that sight, be that hearing, be that smell, as that all declines, it impacts hugely on your ability to socialize, interact, and therefore your cognitive decline can increase. There's more and more research linking all these areas about aging well and aging healthily to prevent all forms of disability at the end of the day.
And maybe to add to that, when Andrew has seen and treated lots and lots of patients, I was newer to this disease until I started working with Andrew to find a way to treat this. But I recall when my mom had retired, she had a group of retired friends that they would go to the park to do Tai Chi every Sunday. And it was like this big group of happy, retired, I would say aging well adults. But one of her good friends had geographic atrophy. That's the late stage form of AMD. And that's when, as Andrew described, your vision starts to blur and you actually start to lose central vision. And whenever she arrived, she always just looked a little confused. But she loved the group so much. They got together. It wasn't just Tai Chi. They would go out to eat and drink at brunch after. So it was kind of their community and their sort of their social group after they were done with where they had their careers for like 20, 30 years. But eventually one day she stopped showing up. And that's just because the central vision loss had spread to the point that it just wasn't safe for her to be coming out by herself in a park. And I think all she could do was for her family members to take her to get these eye checkups periodically. And I'll never forget what her husband told my mom. She misses these Tai Chi sessions so much. She thinks about it day and night, but she feels so trapped at home because of this vision loss. So that was sort of my first introduction to the disease. It was very personal. I thought it was, hey, this is my mom's good friend. Why is she not showing up one day? And afterwards, as I interviewed more clinicians and spoke to more patients, I realized that it was really a lonely and alienating disease. Imagine if you talk to your loved one and you can't even see their facial expression. So for me, it's something that I'm still learning about, but undoubtedly, I think really the biggest problem in ophthalmology that's age-related that we really need to solve and help patients.
And that brings me to my next question is, who's at risk for AMD?
Yeah, so everybody as you age, but some people are more at risk than others for obvious reasons. The obvious reasons are your lifestyle is the first start. So like nearly most diseases, if you add stress to your body, and that stress is what we call oxidative stress. It's a form of stress due to environment, pollution, smoking, bad diet, which essentially is most, as we call it back in the UK, most Northern European diets, high fat, high salt, and pretty unhealthy for many organs, but particularly the eye as well. So everybody is at risk. And then a family history of disease puts you more at risk. And then there's the genetics behind it. And it isn't that the genetics are causal, i.e. they cause the disease, but what it is genetic environment interaction in that individual gives you more risk of generating that disease. So if you have a bad diet, you smoke, and you have the wrong genetics, then you are massively increased risk of generating macular degeneration. So as you age, literally over the age of 50, your risk increases per decade. If you carry on smoking, carry on eating badly, not exercising, not looking after yourself, and have the wrong genetics, your risk is rapidly increased.
Okay, so a couple questions. Can AMD be prevented? And if so, what should we be doing to protect ourselves?
Prevention is something that we don't pay enough attention to. So I really appreciate that question. There are several ways of preventing the severity of macular degeneration or the speed it may progress rather than potentially preventing the disease altogether. And that would be not smoking, eating what is called a Mediterranean diet. And I don't mean just starting that, but literally throughout your life, eat well, lots of greens, lots of kale, lots of stem broccoli, lots of tomatoes, lots of basically try and think of 30 different aspects of a Mediterranean diet and eat that weekly. It does, including fish and fish oils and etc. And then it's all about also leading a lifestyle that allows you to maintain your exercise and work-life balance from the exercise point of view. Why is that important? Because it reduces inflammation, and inflammation plays into forming macular degeneration. So as we old, try and keep your weight right, because obesity causes inflammation, and that adds to increasing risk of degenerative diseases, including macular degeneration. So in summary, don't smoke, eat well all your life, maintain an exercise regime. It doesn't mean you have to be an Olympic athlete. and also the aspect of protect your eyes from too much sunlight. So you do not want ultraviolet damage, which is on a spectrum of sunlight, which is essentially quite damaging, causing stress to the cells in the eye, which includes, actually, interesting, if I may, working environments, because LEDs and and offices are really going to need to, maybe I'm being a bit too out there at the moment, but really need to think about how the spectrum of light in office buildings or working environments should be much more towards the red spectrum than the blue-violet spectrum, because it's much more beneficial for your cells, and particularly for your eyes, but not just your eyes, your general well-being and your cells.
So it sounds like a lot of what we talk about on the Aging Well podcast, we have kind of a list of 5. We've actually added one to make it 6, but from a physical standpoint, 5 things that I always teach my students that we can do to limit the risk of disease are exercise and have regular physical activity, eat a healthy diet, maintain a healthy body composition, have good sleep hygiene, and don't smoke. Sounds like those 5 things would be rather important in terms of limiting your risk of AMD. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I missed the sleep one, so thanks, Jeff. Yeah, totally agree with that one, which is the repair with good sleep cycles. Absolutely, and yes, all of those have evidence of reducing the speed of progression of disease. So prevention, if we all started early enough, would be great, and maybe would really reduce the incidence in a long term at a population base. It's expanding hugely globally with the aging. So we're not aging well, but we're aging. Yeah. And with that comes the dilemma of the burden of disease.
And we've kind of gone down a bit of a rabbit hole recently with the podcast into a little bit of epigenetics. And I don't know, this may not be kind of in your area, but is there some research in that area that, where we've looked at, you said it can be in the genetics, but it sounds like there's a bit of a preventative side to minimizing some of those genetic effects. So are you aware of any research kind of looking into the epigenetics behind macular degeneration?
Kai, do you want to take this, or I'm happy to go?
Happy for you to go.
Okay. So there's not been enough, as much drive on the epigenetics, but it is. So let me explain. The genetic basis, there's many genes that are associated with macular degeneration. There are 2 main ones on the chromosome 1 and chromosome 10 that give you a very high association with macular degeneration. If you have the wrong gene, then your risk of getting disease is increased, not the severity, but the risk. And then people have been looking, that's great, okay, but it's not causal. So how's the gene-environment interaction occurring? Which brings in what's happening at the epigenome and the epigenetics. So there is particularly in the States, but also in the Netherlands, there's a huge bit of work going on at a population level, looking at the epigenomics of the impact on on chromosome 1 and 10 in particular, about how that's altering cell function as a result of the epigenetics. There is nothing direct come out of that yet, but it's early days, and I'm really excited to see. It's not what I do in my research, but really excited to see what may come out of that, because undoubtedly the epigenetics, and particularly in families where they may not have the traditional genetic risk, but they've still got a family history, is what is the epigenetics there that's causing that to run through the family and causing the environment gene interaction that's causing disease. So it's a whole avenue of how you might be able to look to understand prevention better. I totally agree.
There's also the concept of inflammaging. So as we age, somehow or another, our immune responses are not correctly regulated. Sometimes it's too much, sometimes it's too little, or it's happening at the wrong time, at the wrong place. And we learned about it, with some of these infectious diseases that affect the elderly more, or some of these autoimmune diseases where as you age, somehow or another, your incidence goes up. And all of this is really central to AMD, where there is this low-grade chronic inflammation in the retina. And I think an emerging research concept that I'm very excited about is how, partly related to epigenetics, there is dysregulated immune gene expression as we age. And I think that could be a very promising explanation as well as point of intervention for all of these age-related diseases. Because, with epigenetics, if you have one gene that doesn't express correctly, either too much, too little, or at the wrong time it's turning on, it affects the entire gene expression network of the immune system, and that can really drive disease. So something that we are watching out for and hope that it would inform more therapies.
That's something that brings us also back to our list of 5 things that we can be doing to prevent many of these different diseases. One of my mentors just recently retired, and that's why he's on the kind of top of my head right now. Mike Flynn did a lot of work with exercise immunology, and he and some of his colleagues kind of took that inflammaging term a little bit further and have coined the phrase inactivity, indicating that a lot of this, what we see in inflammation with the aging population, is a bit more of the result of some of our lack of activity as we have kind of gone through our aging. And so it is kind of interesting to kind of maybe circle back to how our behaviors are impacting some of this risk of developing AMD. And AMD is a lot easier to say than age-related macular degeneration. So we're just going to stick with that.
Agreed. Stick to it. Yeah.
And we could probably talk forever in terms of the preventative side of this, but I think one of the main reasons we brought you onto this podcast is to talk about this novel treatment that you have developed for AMD. And, so before we kind of talk about the treatment itself, because I think it's pretty fascinating and I think it's tremendously exciting that the publication for it just came out this month. And so I feel like we're kind of getting ahead of most other maybe aging podcasts in terms of having you two on here. But before we kind of circle back to that, how is AMD typically treated?
Yeah, so there are 2 forms of AMD. The majority form is what's called dry. These are awful terms, but dry basically means you're slowly dying. Your cells are slowly dying, and you lose the cells eventually in the function. That accounts for about 85% of the patients with macular degeneration AMD. Then there's about 10 to 15% that also get what's called the wet form. And the wet form is where there is a drive that you generate all these new blood vessels that arise underneath the retina, and they can cause leakage. So the retina swells and they can bleed. So you get devastating acute loss of vision. When you've got wet AMD, there's currently multiple treatments, which are injections inside the eye. And these are to reduce the blood vessels. They're commonly what's called anti-VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor inhibitors. And they are widespread across the world now and have been for the last 10 or more years in routine practice. But that does not treat 85% of patients who go on to continue to lose vision. And even in the wet form, they continue over years and years and years to lose vision due to the dry form that they also have. So really, we're looking at the major impact, which is in dry. There's a really good treatment to try and maintain vision as long as possible for the wet and recover vision if you've got swelling. But we're looking over a period of 10 years' time, or 15 years, or 20 years in the lifespan of that patient. So not so much a cure, which would be wonderful, but what it would be is a prevention of progression which are essentially, because it's age-related, would outlive them. So you would continue to live a healthy lifespan or health eye span with preventing this continued degeneration in dry. I'm confusing it even more, in dry AMD, not wet AMD.
Yeah, and there were two. So in the past, when multiple companies had tried to develop treatments for the dry form of AMD, that advanced stage is called geographic atrophy, when you've started going blind. They actually had multiple clinical trials that looked promising at first but failed. But last year, we had the two first ever FDA approved products for dry AMD, specifically geographic atrophy, the advanced stage. So both of them block a certain immune pathway known as the complement cascade. So this is really exciting for our field, because in the past, it was kind of like a death sentence. You just slowly go blind. Your ophthalmologist is really just tracking the decline of your vision rather than treating you. So these checkups are really checkups. They're not treatments. And so now I think there's really a lot more hope that we can make good targeted treatments that can really slow the decline of vision, or maybe even one day just halt it or even reverse it. Those two drugs that were just approved last year, they still have a very modest effect size. So there is still concern that, well, this is not the therapy that patients are jumping up and down for to get to. And so that's something that we aspire to take forward, something that is really helpful for vision and that patients would want.
Yeah, and if I may, in addition, there was pivotal trials as well by the National Eye Institute, NIH, in the States. I mean, huge and great power to them for doing this, which was taking patients with dry AMD and giving them supplements. So these supplements were called AREDs because that was the short term for essentially the treatment of prevention of progression of age-related macular degeneration. And essentially, these supplements have vitamin C in them, vitamin E. They also have copper, zinc, lutein, which is good, and zeaxanthin, which are healthy nutrients for cells in the retina. What they showed is if one eye was affected with dry AMD, it would reduce the progression on the other eye by about 20-25%, which is super. But if both eyes are affected, it had very little effect. I can't explain that biologically, but that's what the data shows. So that was there before the new FDA-approved drugs. But if we look really at it, it's wonderful this is happening, but we've still got to look at a major impact to really change the outcomes, because it's small steps at the moment that are really making any change to a patient's outcome or well-being.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Yeah, you said injection in the eyes, and I got chills all over my body. I was like, "Oh, that's no." I'd much rather take like you said, like lutein. Lutein is awesome. It's really helped with my eyes. Okay, I got another mouthful for you. Cirrus Therapeutic Ocular Immunology Focused Company. What does that mean in layman's
Oh, no,
terms?
we thought that was in layman terms.
We failed.
No,
So it turns out that a lot of blinding conditions, they are tied to the immune system of the eye. So there might be too much immune response. There might be aberrant immune response. And that then consequently drives the blindness. It might lead to cells dying. It might lead to unhealthy cells, etc. So by that, what we mean is that Cirrus Therapeutics wants to leverage our understanding of the immune system of the eye to go treat all of these diseases. And dry AMD that we've talked about a lot is one such classic case where there is chronic low-grade inflammation in the retina. So it's not that the eye is so inflamed that you see them, oh, your eyes are red, it's cloudy, etc. It's really this low-grade inflammation that over years can drive unhealthy cells and even cell death and dysfunctional cells. So that's what we want to leverage because that's our key area of expertise. And honestly, with dry AMD is thought to be the main pathological pathway, the main problem. And in terms of how we're approaching it, we've unveiled our very first approach, which is this publication that was featured on the front cover of Science Translational Medicine. Unfortunately, it does use an injection. So we do inject the eye, but that's the most direct way to get something into the eye and protect the cells. But this is a novel therapy where we inject the eye to deliver genetic instructions to boost the expression of a protein known as IRAK-M. And I'll let Andrew talk more about why we think that would be helpful. And we believe that this is a way that can really protect the retina and therefore visions of these patients.
Yeah, so first of all, if you have any PR suggestions about how to make it more lay friendly, they'll be very welcome. so thank you. But coming back to the discovery and why we think this will work, coming into a little bit of detail, if people remember that the retina may have what are called rods and cones, and you need those rods and cones, which are called photoreceptors, to signal in order to see, but they don't work unless you have other cells around them. And one of the major cells you need is what we call the retinal pigment epithelium. Make it simple, call it RPE. These are cells that are pretty damn busy. They're busy because they have to clear the garbage from the photoreceptors working very hard. They have to supply the photoreceptors with energy and nutrients and certain vitamins in order, like vitamin A, in order for the photoreceptors to work. They have to protect the photoreceptors, so they work as a strong barrier, but also as an immune barrier, so they're very there to make sure there isn't overt inflammation or anything happening that can make the photoreceptors upset. So these cells are really busy in life. And these are the cells that get targeted in macular degeneration that eventually die, that eventually then kill the photoreceptors, that leave you with no vision in that area. So if we look at the pigment, the RPE, and say this is a really essential cell to live long, live healthily, and keep vision going, then we have to say why, as we get older, does that function decline? And it does in everybody. So even without the disease, sadly, as I know, I can't read my novel at night without a light on. I can't do it under the duvet like you did as a kid. You know, your sensitivity gets less and less. Your ability for your photoreceptors and RPE to function as well as they did declines with age. No different with everything else that we do. And the main reasons for that are multiple, but one of them is that, of course, the engine room of all our cells and the RPE becomes more fatigued, and that's the mitochondria, which is essentially the engine factory of a cell. At the same time, as we get older, we've discussed it, we become slightly more inflammatory, maybe both personality-wise as well as cell-wise. But the tissues are essentially generally more heightened inflammatory status. So both are preventing the cells from functioning. What we found to try and control all of that was a molecule called IRAK-M that really is there to regulate inside a cell lots of different inflammatory processes. So it stops the cell from becoming hyperinflamed, whilst also allowing the cell to respond with inflammation if it needs to. And in the RPE, as we get older, that level of protein declines. It just gets less and less and less as we age. That doesn't mean that is the cause of macular degeneration. But when we looked at patients with macular degeneration, they had literally rock bottom levels of this protein. So as we age, and we also know our visual function isn't good, this protein is less. In disease, it's rock bottom. So we looked at all the mechanisms of what happens with this protein. And what we found is if you consider macular degeneration to be influenced and the pathways that lead to the death of the cells, as we mentioned earlier, oxidation and oxidative stress, mitochondria getting completely fatigued and dying, inflammation occurring, and damage to the cell due to that part of inflammation as well, complement. There are other pathways. IRAK-M, when it goes down, means all these areas, these cells are more prone to target effect by any of these pathways. When we then maintain the normal levels of IRAK-M, i.e. put it back to youth, then what you see is the endrine room improves, the mitochondrial function improves, you protect against oxidative stress, you reduce inflammation, and you get much healthier cells that provide function to the retina. So therefore, we then started to say, okay, how do we then get these levels normal again so that we would be able to treat patients and prevent the progression of decline that we see, particularly in macular degeneration. And I'll hand back to Kai because he'll describe how we plan to do that.
Yeah. So we think that there have been a lot of advances in the gene therapy space, and specifically there was a drug approved several years ago called Luxturna. You do a one-time injection of a genetic instruction to make the protein that the patient did not have, and it was able to treat a rare monogenic eye disease. So we're leveraging that technology to inject now the genetic instructions for IRAK-M, which is declining with age, and further with dry AMD into patient eyes. And we think that this is really the most comprehensive strategy out there. There are different problems with the retina, as Andrew had highlighted. And this is really a pathway agnostic method because IRAK-M is able to address all of these pathological bad pathways. So we think this is really the most comprehensive therapy, as well as a really large body of evidence. You had talked about epigenetics, so IRAK-M declines with aging. We have found human genetics association, so rare mutations in this gene that stop its function increases your chances in patients of getting dry AMD, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really an evidence-based approach, and we think that it provides an excellent example of going after age-related diseases by having an intervention that is targeted towards the root cause of aging. In this case, the loss of a key protein that maintains the health of the retina, stops the inflammation, maintains the battery function, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really excited about unveiling this approach and the scientific discovery behind it, and now are taking it forward through preclinical development and hope that we can initiate clinical trials right after that.
Now, is this something that could have a bit more of a prophylactic approach to it as well? That, maybe you have somebody who you're able to capture a little bit of early decline in some of that vision, and okay, let's hit it hard now with this genetic, changing the genetic instruction, and that would then limit the
Jeff, you
risk.
have just made Andrew's day because he really wants to use this more broadly. Andrew, you should.
No, go for it. No, I'm smiling, thinking, gosh, we need Jeff on our side here. So thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, in the real terms, being able, I think it's from Harvard, isn't it, to be precise and predictive in the patients you're going to treat to prevent disease from getting worse or from getting to a level that becomes disabling in any way is exactly what we want to get to. So there's a broader aspect, not just for the eye, but now we're seeing it coming out about this level being implicated in other conditions, including cardiac, including brain, etc. So it's really exciting. But hey, we're sticking with the eye at the moment because that's where our specialty is. But you're right. So what we at the same time working with lots of colleagues and looking about how you can stratify risk for patients to treat earlier in order to prevent those that are highest at risk, for at least so you can start treating earlier and earlier, i.e. more preventative than actually treatment-wise. I agree. It'd be really exciting.
During the intermediate stage of dry AMD, which has the unfortunate name intermediate AMD, they haven't had the central vision loss. So they don't have these like blind spots in their vision that keep growing yet. Instead, the common complaint is they read very slowly, or they cannot see well in the dark. You take them to a movie theater, they cannot find their seat, they freeze up. So all of these are visual dysfunction, but not blindness yet. And we think that this approach could actually first prevent you from getting the blindness. And second, maybe it could just reverse all of these dysfunction, because the dysfunction is thought to be due to the inflammation, the mitochondrial problems, and the oxidative stress. So we're really excited that this could be preventive as well in some of these earlier stage patients.
Now, when I go to the eye doctor, for I don't know how many years now, I've been going to Pacific University's optometry program for my eye care, and I end up getting so much more testing and everything, because these are potential doctors that are kind of learning all the technique. They got all the different tools, and so sometimes I think I get a little bit more effect on my eye care than, say, my wife, who just goes to a more local optometrist. Are there tests that we should be kind of asking of our eye doctors a little bit earlier, particularly if we have a risk of AMD, to kind of get ahead of this, so that maybe down the road we're testing early enough that a doctor can capture it, and then this treatment could be imposed and hopefully avoid AMD altogether?
Yeah. I mean, the broad answer is yes. So, why? So there are broadly three major conditions why, certainly over the age of 40 and definitely over the age of 50, depending on your family history, you should have annual checkups at the optometrist. Doesn't have to be an ophthalmologist who's medically trained, but someone who can screen. And why? There are diseases that are reversible, such as cataracts, where you can obviously have your cataracts replaced with plastic lenses. Let's put that to one side. That's a real global problem, but not in the US or Europe. There's glaucoma. That's a neurodegenerative condition that causes loss of vision if you don't get that treated. So picking that up early can prevent the decline in patients if you then start treatment with drops particularly. But then there's macular degeneration. And I put diabetes to one side, because if you're diabetic, you should definitely, obviously, be screened to prevent sight loss due to diabetes. So coming back to macular degeneration, you're absolutely right. Not just the vision that you test, but really everybody should be having images taken of the back of the eye, and particularly what's called OCT, optical coherence tomography. And that basically is, you're able to look at very high resolution at the structure of the retina and the RPE. So you can start seeing signs of disease very early. And what is very exciting for the future, so everyone should be doing that now going forward. And picking it up early is of course, at the moment, we're deficient of treatment, but you can tell them to stop smoking, or you can tell them to change their diet, or you can tell them to get a better exercise program, or you can tell them to sleep well. But the point being, you can try and alter the course of disease whilst we're waiting for therapies. And the other excitement that I can see coming through in 5-10 years easily is, of course, the adaptation of deep learning AI in these images. So they start to help understanding, when we know other information about a patient, who is at risk. And that's what excites me, because then our treatments are being able to treat earlier in a more preventative stratified form. As of today, we have the facility to pick up early, but you need imaging and you need people to go. And I think Kai knows the data in the States about when the NEI went out for a survey, or I think it was the NEI. And it's no different in the UK, by the way. So how poor people understand eye health. And I'll come back to why people need to know isn't just for your eyes, it's for your senses, it's for ability to prevent cognitive decline and live a healthier health span, longer health span, I should say. Kai, sorry, I can't remember that data.
Yeah. Well, so the survey Andrew was talking about was done by Johns Hopkins, and they found that 48% of Americans say that loss of sight is the worst possible health problem they could go through. So it was actually a bigger problem than what one might think of as a usual suspect, cancer, losing a limb, etc. And I think that's just because vision is how we interact with the world. Like we need vision to be able to have social interactions. So it is something that I think that's not just AMD. I think with these kinds of regular eye checks would be critical to catch problems early on. And Jeff, I wanted to add too that my optometrist has an amazing imaging platform. And every time she finishes her exam, I always ask for her to send me the images. So if these are, it's like the surface of Mars. You can see every single blood vessel in the back of your retina. You can see those specialized structures of your retina, as Andrew pointed out. These are unique to your eye. So something to think about. And I think it's just very beautiful images. I could have a geek out moment.
Yeah, one of my last...
I mean, just going... sorry, beg your pardon.
I was just going to say, one of my last visits, the student noticed something on my eye, just like a spot or something. And so it's kind of funny because she almost got excited because she got to use this other equipment to kind of look at it more closely. And I think it was some of that imaging equipment, and really dove into it a lot deeper. Ended up being nothing, but they got to use the equipment, and I think that was good for them.
That's what excited them. Yeah. I was just going to bring in, as we're talking about aging well as very nicely giving us the opportunity to talk about the eye and our discovery. But the excitement of imaging the eye, there's nowhere else in the body can image to such an exquisite degree the structure. MRI scans don't do it for the brain. There just isn't anything at the moment for elsewhere. So we have a massive opportunity to really understand eye disease more. But with deep learning and artificial intelligence, I just want to throw in aging well. There is some beautiful data out there where when you take an image of an eye and then you follow people up, this was work I'm very proud comes from UCL, University College London, nothing to do with California, sorry. And this drives through an understanding that a scan of your eye has a very high predictability of Parkinson's disease, 7 years in advance of getting Parkinson's disease. It also can predict your cognitive decline, not whether you'll get dementia, but the speed of your cognitive decline. So these AI systems, along with a lot of other medical data and the vision of the eye, is doing much more to help us with the health span than we, I think, currently globally give credit for, about how it may change how we can advise patients what we can do about their health span, not just their health eye span. So it's very exciting times.
And unfortunately, when you start looking at some of the social disparities in health, the eye doctor, the dentist are two of the areas that probably people get the less attention because they can't afford to just go to an eye doctor. And it's really, really important to underscore, get to that eye doctor once a year. And for me, it's a lot easier to go to the eye doctor once a year than to want to go to my dentist.
I try and stay away from the dentist, but it's important to have good oral health.
Yes.
And
you're right. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. We talk about health spans, but it's the health inequalities across all Western nations. We may not wish to, without sounding too political, wish to acknowledge it, but in every system, it is the major problem about how we actually get and reduce health inequality. And I see that through innovation. And I see that as an ability, for example, that will be able to influence AI to then be able to support them in getting an image that can generalize their health, not just their eye, but their general health span. And, let's really moonshot, will a phone, which most people have, would be able to take a sort of picture that you'll be able to do this on, to be able to direct them, to overcome the inequalities people have, to be able to even access, as you just said, systems, which we currently have barriers for them. This is not US centric. This is across Europe, UK, US.
That really resonates with me as well. I think, especially in the biotech space, there has been the idea for a long time that could we extend lifespan and longevity. But really, if you think about it, we need to first understand aging biology and first age well. We need to first go after health span, because there is so much more understanding on these age-related mechanisms that would allow us to at least age well, still see well in our later years of our life, and have a meaningful life. I think that's something I'm really excited about as a future direction. I think some of these aging well, for example, ocular health span interventions, they paved the way for us to think in future bigger, such as extending lifespan. But I think right now, as we make drugs and we think about where the unmet need is, I think aging well is really central.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm really invested in this conversation right now because I was born with a weak eye, so I actually can only see out of one eye. I got mono-ocular vision. And so the first 5.5 years of my life, I had to wear an eye patch.
Yeah.
And luckily that strengthened the muscles around my weak eye so it doesn't wander off. But I remember when I turned 30, I was having a really hard time adapting and adjusting to light. Like if I'd go outside and then come inside, I'd have a really hard time. Or even driving at night. I was like, man, I feel like I'm losing my vision. And I went to my eye doctor and he's like, no, your vision's fine. You still have, I got 20/10 in my right eye, luckily.
Wow.
And he's like, you still have 20/10. He goes, you're just getting old. And I was like, I just feel like that shouldn't be
at 30. He told you that.
Yeah. So for you guys to shed light on this and say, hey, there are preventative measures. There are some treatments that we can work with it. Like, I feel like that's more of a breath of fresh air for me personally. And I'm sure some of our listeners are also like, oh man, that does seem much better than, well, you just turned 30. So, you're just going to have to get used to it now. And it's wild. So.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I'm just smiling to myself because, I'm old enough and practiced medicine and ophthalmology long enough to know how things have changed. And the resonance of your interaction with the doctor there was interesting because it used to be so common to say, well, you're just getting older. You'll creak more. Yeah, you won't. You're not strong. You can't see as well. Can't hear as well. Oh dear. But actually, there's all ways of overcoming it. 10% of the population, excuse me, have a condition called, we keep coming up with these great names. I'm sorry, Corbin. Amblyopia.
That's okay.
This is where that you got visual deprivation for whatever reason in one eye. So your brain has a dominance for your other eye. So you don't develop the other eye well enough. So the treatment for many, many years, and still is that you try and create strength in the eye that isn't functioning as well by patching the good eye, getting what is called, I mean, it's an awful term, the lazy eye to start working. And you do that whilst correcting any visual error, refractive error with glasses, and twofold there to try and make the vision as best as possible, stop you getting a squint, which obviously is can be disabling. But there's some success in that. The difficulty we have is what you said, which is actually, even if you get good vision or better vision, then one thing you don't have is what's called depth of vision. So stereopsis, the depth of vision, the ability to be able to judge depth, filling up a cup of tea and seeing where the depth is, hitting a tennis ball, playing golf, whatever it may be, where you've got to have great handball. And there are other ways to compensate for it. But that's the main impact as well people have. So we're getting increasing understanding of eye development now, which is really exciting, about other interventions that might come in for you when you were 2, 3, 4, whenever this happened to you, being able to get better outcomes in later life. But you're right.
Yeah.
Eye health span starts from the cradle. So it's about understanding the development of the eye as well as aging eyes. So we look at it as a life course, if that's a term you're used to. But
and we talk about aging well, beginning really at conception on this podcast a lot. Our whole goal is to be progressing toward a better aging. And the sixth point that I left off of that, 5+1 that we've talked about earlier is social connectedness. And like Kai said, he had the example of the woman who kind of had to dissociate herself from the Tai Chi group because she was losing her vision. And that could be hugely detrimental to a person's well-being. They could be doing all the other stuff that we've talked about, but if you don't have that social connectedness, it could really diminish your capacity to age well. And so vision really becomes one of those kind of keystone points in aging well.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the interesting there, which you mentioned, which we don't understand what the influence is on macular degeneration, is the conception, is the epigenetics that is passed through either the male or the female during conception, and how that passes on through the behavior of the cell function in those patients. Something we really don't understand. We understand happens, we don't understand the impact.
I would assume go ahead.
Sorry. In my mom's friend's case, I think what really killed her was that she was perfectly healthy. Like she had just retired. So, it's like the time when well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but you're going out, you're drinking, you're able to see your grandkids, and, maybe the fellow retirees are comparing how good their grandkids are doing, where they went on vacation. You think of it as a new chapter of life that you should really be enjoying. But for her, everything was working except for her vision. And I thought it was really saddening when I learned that she was just wanting to stay at home because she felt unsafe being out there, even though she was physically fine. I think we really need to do more to address these aging root causes. Corbin, sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I feel like there's got to be some literature out there, because we know like color blindness is passed through genetics, right? And if a mom had a dad who was colorblind, then there's a good chance that if she has a son, he's more than likely going to be colorblind as well, because it's passed through that X gene. So I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some literature out there, and I feel like we've come so far. Oh, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, but so some of the diseases are linked to a gene. So there's a 1-to-1 association. We know that if you have a mutation in this gene, you have achromatopsia. If a mutation in that gene, you have retinitis pigmentosa. I think with AMD, as with a lot of age-related diseases, there is not a single gene that explains all of it. So it's a complex disease that is driven by a lot of these aging processes. And we think that poses a challenge because it's complex. Some people that get it have a certain mutation, but others don't have a mutation in that gene and they still get it. And that was one of the things that Andrew and I had thought really hard about. Well, how could we make a meaningful dent in a disease that is as complex as this? And I think that's where our discovery really shines, because it has human genetics, evidence, but it also declines with aging, which I think some of the earlier genetic data, when they pointed out a gene, it was never clear if this was anything to do with aging. So I think maybe the most comprehensive and thoughtful approach that we can take towards these age-related diseases now is that it's got to be a target and approach that actually checks all of these boxes, whether it's human genetics, age-related, explains the different pathologies that we see in that eye or that tissue, the brain, for example, for some of the neurodegenerative diseases. I think that is really something that we drug developers grapple with, so that, we want to start with the most promising approach and have the ability to help as many patients as possible. So AMD is just starting because there wasn't that single gene that explains it. And we think that this approach is the most promising new one that checks all of the boxes.
Well, this is fascinating stuff. It really is. Is there anything we may have missed in this discussion? Like, what's next for Cirrus Therapeutics?
Yeah, so we just launched the company now that we have unveiled this promising approach. So we are really excited to build the company and build off this discovery. And we're taking it through all of the development stages, development with a capital D, and that then allows us to start our clinical trials. So we're moving full steam as quickly as we can because we really want to see this move forward and help AMD patients.
All right. Well, now for the question we ask of all our guests. What are each of you doing personally to age well?
Ooh. Kai, you go first.
Ouch. Wait, why do I get the hard ones? Well, okay. I am an avid beach volleyball player, and I have found that beach volleyball, so indoor court volleyball is 6 versus 6. Beach volleyball is 2 versus 2, which is a long way of saying you do a lot more work in a shorter time. And I have found that this is sort of my go-to exercise that I do twice a week and just helps me age well and keeps me happy mentally, emotionally, and recharges me for the kind of work that I do. So that is my go-to age well activity. I will not talk about my diet or other things like that.
So your diet's not that great? Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying. I decline to comment on my diet.
You take the fifth.
So, take the fifth. I can't do that, so I have to come out with everything. So, so I try and keep a really. So I love my work, and I try and I work hard and I work long. But that's because I enjoy the mental stimulation and the ambition behind it. To balance that, I exercise. I run it at least 6 days a week. First thing in the morning, early. So I'm with you on that, Jeff. So I get up early, go for a run. It's good for exercise, sets my mind in the right place for the day ahead. And then I try and walk everywhere, not get transport when I can, and give myself time to do that. My diet is reasonably good. I tend to eat lots of fish and not meat, and particularly lots of green vegetables, and try and eat. My wife's not listening, so she'll probably say, no, he doesn't. And try not to eat so much meat. I confess every time I come to the States, which is very frequently, 5 or 6 times a year, what's the first thing I eat, Kai? Do not press on this. I have to have a hamburger. I mean, there's nowhere else in the world does them so well. But I think everything in moderation, including moderation, is a motto. But I try and sleep well, which I do, and I don't have disturbed nights. My sleep amount varies depending on work, but in general, I still don't have disturbed sleep, which I think is really important. So I know I'm having healthy REM sleep. And then for full relaxation, friends, family, and community. And I play the guitar. So I really enjoy doing that. And I play in bands occasionally.
Now,
So
acoustic or electric?
But it's about mind, both.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I like the idea that the beach volleyball, I mean, definitely get you that kind of multi-directional reaction, and it's visual. I mean, that's a great activity for aging well, and I don't think we tend to think of it as much, especially as we're aging. But you look pretty young yet too, so keep up on that so that you can keep doing it as you get older. And I don't fault you for having the hamburger when you come to the States. We went to Ireland, Scotland last summer, and I had to do the fish and chips everywhere we went. And in many cases, I was kind of disappointed.
It is very good.
Yeah, but we found a few good places, and we did. Good. My daughter and I went out one morning and had a very authentic Irish breakfast, and it was definitely not the healthiest meal I've ever eaten in my life, but it was so delicious.
Is bad for you.
Yes, but it was so good. So, I mean, you have to enjoy life. I mean, we talk about all these things we should do to be healthy, but without the social connectedness, without some of the enjoyment of life, I mean, what's the point in it's like, why do I want to? I heard it was a kind of a joke or whatever you'd call it a while back, where the person talks about, I only eat this, and that, and I exercise regularly and do all that. And it's like, why do you do all that? No, it's because I want to live longer. Well, what's the point of living longer if it makes you miserable, right? So we want to be able to balance things so that we can live long and live an enjoyable life. So,
thank you.
Well said.
I agree.
Well said.
I interrupted Corbin, so I'll let him ask his last question here.
Yeah, I was going to give you guys an opportunity to plug yourself one more time, because it truly seems that great things are on the horizon for Cirrus Therapeutics. And if our listeners, they're like, man, I want to know more, I want to learn about their novel therapy, how can they get in touch with you? Is there a website or social media that you can direct them to?
Yeah, absolutely. Cirrus Therapeutics has a LinkedIn website under the name Cirrus Therapeutics, and we have an info email there, info@cirrustx.com. We welcome questions, feedback, comments, and look forward to taking this therapy forward.
And we'll put a link to that.
Yeah, and for me,
in the description box.
And for me, doing that is really an excitement to putting my physician's hat on, to be able to see within my time, we might actually make a big difference to these patients. So being able to drive down this way and age well, increase the health span, what a privilege and opportunity to do that.
Well, Kai Chan and Andrew Dick, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your research efforts. And we wish you continued success in combating AMD and helping us to age well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.